If you like this video and want more of the most shocking disasters in history, please hit the red subscribe button. At the dawn of the 20th century, San Francisco stood as a beacon of prosperity. It was the largest city on the West Coast, a bustling metropolis of nearly 500,000 souls. People often called it the Paris of the West. Its grand Victorian houses climbed those steep hills, and cable cars clanged along the busy streets. The port welcomed ships from every corner of the globe. It was a city built on the dreams of gold miners, railroad barons, and immigrants seeking a new life. A center of finance, trade, and culture, it was a jewel of American progress. Grand public buildings like the newly completed City Hall proclaimed a future of limitless potential. But below the surface, the city was built on a foundation of sand and reclaimed land. Few residents gave much thought to the unseen forces that lay dormant deep within the earth, along the Great San Andreas Fault. Life in San Francisco was vibrant and diverse. Neighborhoods hummed with different languages and traditions. Chinatown was a city within a city, a dense and lively community. Enrico Caruso, the world-famous tenor, was in town to perform at the Grand Opera House. It was a confident, sometimes arrogant city, but in the quiet pre-dawn hours of an ordinary spring day, that perception of permanence was about to be shattered. The ground beneath this glittering city was preparing to move in a way no one could have truly imagined. The morning of April 18, 1906 began like any other. The city was still asleep. The first light of dawn had not yet touched the sky. At precisely 5:12 a.m., a deep rumbling sound began. It was the first sign of the catastrophe to come. This initial foreshock was strong enough to awaken many people across the city. Only seconds later, the main shock erupted. The San Andreas Fault, a massive fracture in the Earth's crust, had ruptured along a 296-mile segment. It was later estimated to have been a magnitude 7.9 earthquake. For approximately 45 to 60 seconds, the city was subjected to unimaginable forces. Buildings swayed violently before collapsing into the streets. The sound was a deafening roar. It was the sound of brick and mortar grinding together, of glass shattering, of a city being torn apart from its foundations. People were thrown from their beds. The solid ground they had always trusted had become a fluid, destructive wave. The shaking was felt from southern Oregon down to Los Angeles. The initial impact was catastrophic. Chimneys toppled by the thousands. The ornate facades of buildings crumbled, raining debris onto the streets below. The grand and supposedly unshakable City Hall was left a skeletal ruin. Its magnificent dome collapsed. Gas mains twisted, water pipes broken, power lines snapped, plunging many areas back into darkness. A new, more relentless enemy was about to emerge from the ruins. The earthquake had broken the city. The fires would consume what was left. Small fires began to break out across the ruined landscape. Broken gas lines fed flames from piles of rubble. Toppled stoves ignited nearby materials. Damaged electrical wires sent sparks into combustible debris. The city's water mains were shattered. Firefighters found themselves helpless. The hydrants were dry. Hoses had no pressure. Small fires began to grow. Individual blazes merged into larger conflagrations. The ham and eggs fire began in a kitchen on Hayes Street. It spread with alarming speed as winds rose. Massive firestorms raged through dense wood-frame districts. Fire Chief Dennis T. Sullivan was mortally wounded when a chimney crashed through the fire station. The department was leaderless at the worst moment. For 3 days and 3 nights, the fire burned uncontrolled. It created its own weather, superheated winds that could incinerate buildings. The glow from the inferno was visible for 100 miles. The fire consumed the financial district. It gutted the grand hotels. It destroyed the mansions of Nob Hill. It ravaged the crowded tenements of Chinatown. It burned through 490 city blocks. It destroyed 25,000 buildings. It covered more than 4 square miles. The fires caused nearly 90% of the total destruction. If you like this video and want more of the most shocking disasters in history, please hit the red subscribe button. In the face of near-total destruction, the people of San Francisco responded with remarkable resilience. As the fires raged, a mass exodus began. Tens of thousands fled the burning city, carrying what few possessions they could salvage. They headed for Golden Gate Park. They headed for the Presidio. They headed for the beaches. Refugee camps sprang up almost overnight. Refugees cooking meals over open fires in Golden Gate Park. The military, under General Frederick Funston, stepped in to maintain order. The response from the authorities was swift, but, sometimes harsh. Mayor Eugene Schmitz issued a proclamation authorizing police and soldiers to shoot looters on sight. The army took control of distributing food and supplies. Long lines formed at relief stations for bread and water. The disaster brought out the best and worst in people. Acts of heroism and charity appeared everywhere. One desperate measure was dynamiting. With no water, soldiers and civilian volunteers used explosives to create firebreaks. The strategy was often poorly executed. Explosions sometimes spread the fire by scattering burning debris. A final, successful firebreak along Van Ness Avenue is credited with saving the western part of the city. The nation and the world responded with an outpouring of aid. A.P. Giannini salvaged his bank's assets from the burning financial district. He set up a plank and barrel desk on the waterfront and began making loans to help residents rebuild their lives. The task of rebuilding San Francisco began almost before the embers had cooled. The spirit of the city was not broken. A defiant optimism took hold. The damnedest, finest ruins businessmen and civic leaders pledged to build a new, greater city. Plans were drawn up for a grander metropolis, wide boulevards, classical architecture inspired by the City Beautiful movement. Daniel Burnham presented a visionary plan. The urgent need to rebuild quickly disputes over property rights meant much of Burnham's ambitious design was ultimately abandoned. The reconstruction was rapid and pragmatic. The city was largely rebuilt along its old street grid. Important changes were made. New building codes were enacted to ensure structures were more resistant to earthquakes and fire. Steel frames became more common. Reinforced concrete became more common. A high-pressure water system was designed and built specifically for firefighting. It was a direct lesson from the failure of the old mains. The disaster also spurred significant advancements. The detailed study of the 1906 quake, led by geologist Andrew Lawson, produced a report that laid the foundation for modern seismology and our understanding of the San Andreas Fault. The 1906 earthquake and fire had profound long-term effects. The disaster accelerated a shift of trade and population to other West Coast cities, particularly Los Angeles. Today, more than a century later, the 1906 earthquake remains a defining event in San Francisco's history. The little gold fire hydrants seen on some street corners, which mark the locations of the high-pressure water system, are quiet monuments to the lessons learned. A story of how a city, faced with utter ruin, found the will to rise again from its own ashes.